Good morning, children, and welcome back to the digital classroom of Vikram Janeja. In my previous video, I had taught you The Merchant of Venice, Act 1, Scene 1. I'd also given you a worksheet, and I hope you have done that worksheet in your fair literature and English notebooks. In my today's video, I'm going to teach you Act 1, Scene 2, and I'll explain you the act line by line. Before that, let me give you a little recap on what has taken place till now in the play, in the first act, the first scene of the first act. Now we are presented in the first scene of the first act with the protagonist in a melancholic mood. The protagonist of the play is Antonio, who is a rich merchant, but he is in a melancholic mood, and we are not able to make out as to why he is in a melancholic mood. His friends Stellanio and Slerino are trying to make presumptions that he might be sad because of his merchandise, and he denies being sad because of his merchandise. Then his friends also talk about the fact that he might be in love, to which he replies, "Fi." Then after that, we are introduced to the character named Bassanio, who is the best friend of Antonio. Bassanio introduces Portia in this play. Portia is the lover of Bassanio. Bassanio and Portia had met earlier when Bassanio had paid a visit to Belmont, and Bassanio has acquainted Antonio of the matter. Bassanio describes Portia to be a very beautiful lady, richly left by her father with a lot of property. And Bassanio intends to go to Belmont and participate in the lottery of caskets, where Portia is at stake, and whosoever wins the lottery of caskets will get to actually get married to Portia. Bassanio doesn't have ready cash with him to take him to Belmont, so he comes to Antonio one more time to ask for money from Antonio so that he can actually go to Belmont and woo Portia. This is with regard to the first scene of the first act. Now let me explain you Act 1, Scene 2, line by line. This scene opens in Portia's room, Portia's palace in Belmont. Portia and her lady-in-waiting Nerissa are present there. Portia says, "Oh Nerissa, my poor little body is weary of this great world." What she means by this is that, "Oh Nerissa, my poor little body is tired of this great big world." So you see, children, Portia, another protagonist of the play, is introduced in a melancholic mood, like Antonio. To which Nerissa replies, "You would be sweet, madam, if your miseries were in the same abundance as your good fortunes are, and yet for aught I see they are sick that surfeit with too much, as they that starve with nothing." To this Nerissa replies, "You would be tired, madam, if you had bad luck rather than wealth and good luck. But as far as I can tell, people with too much suffer as much as people with nothing. The best way to be happy is to be in between. When you have too much, you get old sooner." Now here Nerissa says, "And yet for aught I see they are sick that surfeit with too much, as they that starve with nothing. It is no mean happiness, therefore, to be seated in the mean. Superfluity comes sooner by white hairs, but competency lives longer." To this, Nerissa is trying to reply in this manner, that the best way to be happy is to be in between. Means you shall neither be too rich nor be too poor. When you have too much, you get old sooner, but having just enough helps you live longer. To this, Portia replies, "Good sentences and well pronounced." She says, "Good point and well said." Nerissa says, "They would be better if well followed." Nerissa replies to that, "It would be better if you actually apply them in your life." Portia says, "If to do were as easy as to know what were good to do, chapels had been churches and poor men's cottages, princesses' palaces. It is a good divine that follows his own instructions." So Portia replies, You think it's that easy? If doing good deeds were as easy as knowing how to do them, then everyone would be better off. Small chapels would be big churches, and poor men's cottages would be princesses' palaces. It takes a good priest to practice what he preaches. Then Portia says, I can easier teach 20 what were good to be done than to be one of the 20 to follow mine own teaching. The brain may devise laws for the blood, but a hot temper leaps over a cold decree. Such a here is madness, the youth. And then Portia continues saying, for me it is easier to lecture 20 people on how to be good than to be the one person out of 20 who actually does good things. She says the brain can tell the heart what to do, but how does it matter? Cold rules don't matter when you have got a hot temper. Then she gives example of a hare. Such a hare is madness, the youth, to skip over the measures of good counsel, the cripple, but this reasoning is not in fashion to choose me a husband. O me, the word choose, I may neither choose whom I would know, nor refuse whom I dislike. So is the will of a living daughter curbed by the will of a dead father. Is it not hard, Nerissa, that I cannot choose one, nor refuse none? So Portia continues saying that young people are like frisky young rabbits, and good device is like a crippled old man trying to catch them. But thinking like this won't help me choose a husband. Oh, the word choose is stranger. It's very strange for me. I can't choose who I like or refuse who I dislike. I am a living daughter, still controlled by the wishes of a dead father. Isn't it a pain, Nerissa, that I can't choose or refuse anyone whom I want to? To this, Nerissa gives a piece of advice to Portia. She says, your father was ever virtuous, and holy men at their death have good inspirations. Therefore, the lottery that he hath devised in these 3 chests of gold, silver, and lead, whereof who chooses this, meaning chooses you, will no doubt never be chosen by any rightly but one who shall rightly love. So Nerissa says, your father was an extremely moral man, and religious people get good ideas on their deathbeds. Your father's idea was to have a game with 3 boxes. The suitor who can figure out whether to pick the gold, silver, or lead box will solve your father's riddle, and that suitor will be the man for you, for he will be choosing the inscriptions on the casket, and he'll be wise enough to choose the right inscription on the right casket. And if he is a wise man, he will surely love you, Portia. The suitors who can figure out what to pick, whether to pick gold, silver, or lead box, will solve the exact riddle and will be the right person according to your father. But what warmth is there in your affection towards any of these princely suitors that are already come? Now, Nerissa says that no one is going to actually choose the right box who doesn't deserve your love. And then she asks, what? Tell me, Portia, do you like any of the princely suitors who have already come? There were 6 suitors who had come, and Nerissa wanted to check if Portia has any affection for any of the suitors who have already come. Then Portia says, I pray thee, overname them, and as thou namest them, I'll describe them, and according to my description, level at my affection. Portia says, run through the list. As you name them, I'll describe them for you, and from my descriptions, you can guess how I feel towards them. Nerissa says, first there is the Neapolitan prince. Nerissa says, well, first there is the prince from Naples. Portia says, that's a colt indeed, for he doth nothing but talk of his horses, and he makes it a great appropriation to his own good part that he can shew himself. I am much afeard, my lady, his mother played false with a smith. Portia mocks at the prince from Naples. She says, yes, he is a colt. All he talks about is his horses. He thinks it's a great credit to his character that he can shoe a horse all by himself. And she says, I'm afraid his mother must have had an affair with the blacksmith that he boasts so much about showing his horse himself. So Portia calls him a cold and untrained horse, and she even goes on to an extent of mocking the prince from Naples by telling him to be born out of the illegitimate relationship between a blacksmith and Naples, Prince of Naples' mother. Nerissa then speaks about the second suitor. She says then there is County Palatine. Nerissa says then there is the person by the name of the County Palatine. Portia says he doth nothing but frown as he would say, who would say, and you will not have me choose. He hears many merry tales and smiles not. I fear he will prove the weeping philosopher when he grows old. Being so full of unmannerly sadness in his youth, I'd rather be married to a death's head with a bone in his mouth than to be either of these. God defend me from these two. Portia mocks at this man as well. She says that he does nothing but frown as if he wants to say, if you don't want me, I don't care. He doesn't even smile when he hears funny stories. If he's so sad and solemn when he's young, I can only imagine how much he'll cry as an old man. She even compares him to Heraclitus, a weeping philosopher. She says, I would rather be married to a skull with a bone in its mouth than to either of those men. God protect me from these two. That is, Prince from Naples and County Palatine. Then Nerissa says, what do you think of Monsieur Le Bon? The French lord Monsieur Le Bon. Nerissa asks about Portia's affection towards Monsieur Le Bon. Portia replies, God made him and therefore let him pass for a man. In truth, I know it's a sin to be a mocker, but why he hath a horse better than the Neapolitans, a better bad habit of frowning than the County Palatine. He's every man in no man. If a throstle sings, he falls straight a capering. He'll fence with his own shadow. If I should marry him, I should marry 20 husbands. If he would despise me, I would forgive him. For if he loves me to madness, I shall never require him. So Portia says, we might as well call him a man since God created him. No, I know it's bad to make fun of people, Portia knows at the back of her mind. But still she says that this man is more boastful because his horses are better than Neapolitans, and this man has more frowning habit, for he frowns more than County Palatine. He was trying to outdo everyone so much that you couldn't tell who he was. He started dancing every time a bird sang, and he was so eager to show off his fencing that he would fight with his own shadow. He says, if I married him, I might as well marry 20 husbands, because he's like 20 men all rolled into one. I would understand if he hated me, since even if he loved me desperately, I would never be able to love him back. Then Nerissa says, what say you then to Falconbridge, the young baron of England? So Nerissa speaks about the fourth suitor. What about Falconbridge, that young English baron? Portia says, you know, I say nothing to him, for he understands not me, nor I him. He hath neither Latin, French, nor Italian, and he'll come into the court and swear that I have a poor pennyworth in English. He is a poor, proper man's picture, but alas, who can converse with a dumb show? How oddly he's suited. I think he bought his doublet in Italy, his round horse in France, and his bonnet in Germany, and his behavior everywhere. Portia says, I have no opinion about him. We don't talk because we don't understand each other. He doesn't speak Latin, French, or Italian, and you know how little English I speak. He's great looking. He's a gentleman, but how can you talk to someone who doesn't speak your language? He is dressed so oddly. I think he got his jacket in Italy, his tights in France, and his hat in Germany. And he must have got his behavior from everywhere. Portia then talks about the fifth suitor. What think you of the Scottish lord, his neighbour? What do you think of his neighbour, the Scottish lord? Portia replies, that he hath a neighbourly charity in him, for he borrowed a box of ear of the Englishman, and swore he would pay him again when he was able. I think the Frenchman became his surety and sealed under for another. Portia says, I think he is very forgiving since he let the Englishman slap him on ear without hitting him back rather than defending himself. He just threatened to pay the Englishman back later. Then the Frenchman promised to help the Scottish lord to pay the Englishman back and added a slap of his own. So Portia says that this man actually is indebted so much to the Frenchman, for the French came to the help or the rescue of the Scottish lord against their fight against English, that one day if Englishman has to ask for any favor, if he asks for Portia even in lieu of the help, one day if the Frenchman has to ask for any favor, means even if he asks for Portia in lieu of the help he has given to Scottish lord against Englishmen, then he won't even hesitate to give Portia to the Frenchman. Then Nerissa speaks about the sixth and the last suitor. How like you the young German, the Duke of Saxony's nephew? Means, how did you like the young German, the Duke of Saxony's nephew? Portia replies to that, very wildly in the morning when he is sober, and most wildly in the afternoon when he is drunk. When he is best, he is a little worse than a man, and when he is worst, he is a little better than a beast. And the worst fall that ever fell, I hope I shall make shift to go without him. Portia says, he is pretty awful in the morning when he is sobering up, and even worse in the afternoon when he is drunk. At his best, he is a little less than a man, and at his worst, he is a little more than an animal. If we got married and he tragically met his demise, I'm sure I could find a way to go on without him. So Portia doesn't want to get married to him. She says, even if the worst has to happen in my life, the worst, I would try and go without this man. Nerissa says, if he should offer to choose and choose the right casket, you should refuse to perform your father's will. If you should refuse to accept him. Nerissa says, if he offers to play the game and chooses the right box, what will you do? Then will you reject him? You will be disobeying your father's last wishes then. Portia says, therefore, for the fear of the worst, I pray thee, set a deep glass of Rhenish wine on the contrary casket, for if the devil be within and the temptation without, I know he'll choose it. I'll do anything, Nerissa, or I'll be married to a sponge. Portia says, I know, for the fear of the worst to happen if this man actually has to go in for the lottery of casket. So please, I'm requesting you to put a nice big glass of white wine on the wrong box. I know he'll get tempted and choose that one. I'll do anything rather than marrying a drunk man, Nerissa. Nerissa says, you need not fear, lady, the having of any of these lords. They have acquainted me with their determinations, which is indeed to return to their home and to trouble you with no more suit, unless you may be won by some other sort than your father's imposition, depending on the caskets. Nerissa replies to that. She says, don't you worry, Portia, about any of these lords, my lady. They've all told me that what they want. What is it to go back home, which is to go back home and give up on you, unless there was some other way to win you than your father's pick the box test. Portia says, if I live to be as old as Sibylla, I'll die as chaste as Diana, unless I be obtained by the manner of my father's will. I'm glad this parcel of words are so reasonable, for there is not one among them but I dot on his very absence, and I pray God grant them a fair departure. Portia says, I'll die an old maid like Sibylla. Now, there's a biblical allusion. There was this Sibylla who lived very old because she had got this will from God that she could live to be the maximum. If I'll die an old maid unless I can be won according to the rules set by my father's will, I am glad that these... Now she says, I'll be as chaste, as pure as Diana. Diana is the goddess of chastity and hunting. So she says, even if I have to live as old as Sibylla, I'll die as chaste or as pure as Diana. I'm glad these suitors are sensible enough to stay away. The only thing I like about them is that they are not there. I wish them all the safe journey back home. Then Portia talks about a man, Nerissa talks about the man Portia loves. Do you not remember, lady, in your father's time, a Venetian, a scholar, and a soldier that came hither in the company of the Marquis of Montferrat. Now, Nerissa tries to make Portia recall that particular time. She says, do you remember a Venetian scholar and a soldier who accompanied the Marquis of Montferrat here once when your father was still alive? Then Portia says, yes, it was Bassanio, as I think he was so called. Yes, that was Bassanio, I think that was his name. To which Nerissa replies, true, madam, he of all the men that ever my foolish eyes looked upon was the best deserving of fair lady. Nerissa says, yes, madam, that's the one. He deserves a beautiful wife more than all the other men I've ever seen. So Portia says, I remember him well and I remember him worthy of thy praise. She says, I remember him well and my memory tells me that he deserves your praise. When they're talking to each other, a servant enters. How now, what news? The servant says, the 4 strangers seek for you, madam, to take their leave, and there's a forerunner come from a 5th, the Prince of Morocco, who brings word the prince, his master, will be here tonight. Now the servant says, the 4 suitors are looking for you so that they can say goodbye. Now children, there were 6 suitors, and the servant is talking about 4 suitors. So there are 2 possibilities. One possibility is that Shakespeare has made a mistake with numbers. He probably had forgotten that there were 6 suitors who had been talked about. Or maybe the servant did not feel the need of talking about the other 2 suitors who were insignificant. And there were only 4 suitors he thought were significant that he should talk about. So the servant says, the 4 suitors are looking for you so that they can say goodbye, madam. And there's a messenger representing the 5th one, the Prince of Morocco, who says the prince will be here tonight. Portia says, if I could bid the 5th welcome with so good a heart as I can bid the other 4 farewell, I should be glad of this approach. If he have the condition of a saint and the complexion of a devil, I'd rather he should shrive me than wive me. So Portia says, if I could say hello to the 5th one as happily as I'm saying goodbye to the first 4, I would be very happy that he's coming. If he's as good as a saint but he's black like a devil, I would rather he hear my confession than marry me. Then she says, come, Nerissa. And then she talks to servant Sirrah, go before while we shut the gates upon one wooer, another knocks at the door. Then she says, Portia says, let's go, Nerissa. And then she speaks to the servant, go ahead. As soon as we shut the door on one suitor, another one starts knocking. And then they exeunt. They exeunt means they exit. So children, we have come to the end of the second scene of the first act of The Merchant of Venice. I am going to attach a worksheet with it. There will be a worksheet containing only 3 questions. There's no extract, but there's a worksheet containing 3 questions. I would want you to go through these 3 questions and attempt these 3 questions in your fair literature and English notebooks. Thank you. Have a nice day. God bless you all. Stay safe.